Recently the indie show Murder Drones has concluded. As a fan of this, I have decided to make this huge review, where I will analyze each of the episodes and put the characters into a tier list afterwards. The first episode, which is the pilot for some reason, starts with Yuzi Dorman, the main character of the show, giving exposition about the worker drones, the elimination of biological life in Copper 9, and the arrival of the disassembly drones by orders of Jensen, their parent company. In the present day, not too long after the disassembly drones arrive, Yuzi presents her slit showing her railgun, much to the horror of her peers and the apathy of her teacher, who points out that the homework was a word problem in buying watermelons and that her repressed emotional baggage was only worth 2 points. In the rubric, the railgun ends up malfunctioning, causing an explosion. Yuzi is then seen in the sick bay after the accidental explosion, where she talks to Thad about her plan to sneak to the Spire of Corpses to find the last part of her railgun, for it to function. Thad questions if it is necessary, seeing as Yuzi's father, Condorman, built some doors, because why not? Yuzi seems to get angry at Thad, then leaves, clarifying she is not angry, just generally hormonal, which actually is pretty funny. At 3 a.m., she gears up and steals the master door key from her dad's office. Yuzi tries to sneak out but is met by him, who asks where she is going. Yuzi of course lies about it by saying she wants to examine door 1. As help for a school project, she says she wants to join the WTF and hide behind doors like cowards. Khan takes her sarcasm seriously and gives her his wrench, a sentimental item to him. She is let out, after which Khan exclaims, "They grow up so fast." After she sneaks out to the corpse spider, Yuzi finds the components she needs but is attacked by serial designation N, who impales her hand, which has nanite syringe. In desperation, Yuzi smacks N's head with a severed robot arm and boots up blind and amnesiac, then responds,
"Did you just slap me with that arm?"
Which Yuzi, who did not know murder drones could communicate, bluntly stated, "Holy crap." It talks due to his optical sensors being temporarily knocked out, and assumes that Yuzi is a new member of his squad and that there are more of his kind out hunting. Yuzi then tries to leave, but she clutches her hand, as a result of N's earlier attack in her, and then tells her that they can use their saliva to neutralize the nanotest. Yuzi heads to the landing pod and puts her hand in N's mouth to stop the infection. N, still not suspecting Yuzi of being a worker drone, briefly talks about the disassembly drone's functions and serial designation D, his crush, and serial designation J, his boss, his other teammates, which for some reason have one letter in their names. I wish that they gave J, N and V better names, but okay anyways. Let's continue to analyze episode 1, shall we? Yuzi realizes that the landing pod is a spacecraft that could get the worker drones off the planet. She then questions him about what Jensen would do to them once the worker drones were all killed. Before N could answer, J and V then return from their hunt. V notices Yuzi and remarks about using her as practice as balloon animal shapes, but stops when J finds N appearing to be offline and knocks him back to his senses, and then realizes that Yuzi is a worker drone and that she had attacked him with a railgun. Spotting her tracks in the snow, he then exclaims that he left a dangerous weapon lying around, as an excuse to throw his teammates off, who are not convinced by those words. As Yuzi flees from the corpse house and pursues her back to the WTF hideout, he then proceeds to slaughter the 4 worker drones. While pursuing Yuzi then runs into her father, who's horrified by the destroyed doors and the murder drone, and flies right in front of him, causing Yuzi to tell him to move aside so she could amend her problems. While N admits that he appreciates spending time with her, he can't let her use the weapon. Khan fails to move, allowing N to impale Yuzi, which is when Yuzi pleads with her father to grab the gun and shoot N, but he simply closes the doors. In her the act surprises in that he looks at Yuzi with sadness before V and J arrive, upon which he tosses her aside to prevent them from killing her, impressed that N had finally done something useful for once. He flies off to slaughter the worker drones. Before J could fly off, N questions J about the worker drones, but J impales him in the chest with an infectious virus, slyly stating that it was what she wanted to hear. She sarcastically apologizes for having to put him down before flying off with the two disassembly drones. Yuzi comes out of hiding and scolds N as she tries to pursue them, realizing that she can't get after them. She removes the virus from N. At the evacuation spot, Thad attempts to rally the WTF to fight the murder drones, but nobody helps. He impales Thad and is about to kill him but stops when Yuzi and N arrive. Then complains to Jay about being treated harshly but also points it out as constructive criticism. V then throws Thad to the side. Before Yuzi decides to fight J, Yuzi throws the Jensen gun at J and hits one of her headlights, causing her to stumble. J fires a machine gun at Yuzi before commending the quality of Jensen products. Yuzi uses the distraction to drop-kick the pen into her eye, causing her to fire a powerful laser which both Yuzi and N narrowly dodge. V aims her missile launcher at N, who likewise tries to retaliate, only to have Heart's steam out of his launcher. V's missile lands next to him before exploding. J then launches an imp blast to disable Yuzi. While N clashes with V, seeing Yuzi in danger, he apologizes to V and licks her blades, causing her to become disgusted. He uses the distraction to slam her into the ground. J then commends Yuzi for providing some sort of resistance, but as she goes through a monologue, Yuzi stabs her leg with her stinger, causing her to stumble and fall. She then points her railgun and threatens to shoot if she says another buzz line, which she does and ends up being seemingly annihilated by the railgun and subdues V with her tail. As the worker drones come out of hiding and thank Yuzi and N for their resistance, Khan then shamefully emerges from the crowd. Much to Yuzi's anger, she then decides to save himself the trouble and banish herself from the colony. She leaves with N and V. Yuzi is seen sitting in a broken car staring at the sunrise and stands inside a random building because sunlight would kill him, calling out to her about how he hopes she's having important character growth or something. Yuzi says she's just thinking about killing all humans and starts laughing maniacally as her eyes flicker yellow for some reason, and for a split second a strange symbol appears, thus concluding the episode. I do wonder whose symbol is that. Anyways, that was an amazing episode and really sets put the theme of the show, and surprisingly I enjoyed all of the character, even Yuzi's father, who I thought would be very annoying overall. I give this episode a rating of 10 out of 10. The second episode starts with James talks to other humans, with N as a butler, who appears holding a serving platter. N and his fellow disassembly drones appear to resemble worker drones for the scene and runs into V. They both spill their held items. They blush as they gather up their spilled items, only for J to come in and begin talking to Tessa, who then introduces a new drone to the three of them. But oh wait, it's all revealed to be a dream. But I must admit that I love the way this show, how N has a crush in V and awakens from slumber to Yuzi calling his name, as she and V have a quick exchange over the strange symbol in Yuzi's visor. Yuzi informs N that his cap is actually a pilot's cap and then questions Yuzi if the plan to kill all humans is actually moral, which Yuzi responds that it is, that humans had it coming, since they sent his group off without communications and reformatted their memories. V questions Yuzi, taunting her that her story does not make sense and that the worker drones are only pretending to be innocent, and attempts to defuse the situation by pulling the two apart. And when N attempts to pat Yuzi's head, he narrows her eyes back at Yuzi's colony. Tim assigns Frank, whom he misidentified as Ladderbot 5000, to fix the hole in the roof caused by N's departure. In the previous episode, Frank attempts a repair in the roof, only for Jay's corpse to mysteriously crawl away. That's strange and kinda creepy. Upon investigating, Frank discovers a strange biomechanical spider-like device which then spawns a massive creature that assimilates him. Con arrives at a parent-teacher conference, where the teacher informs him that Yuzi has been absent for some time. Con ponders this and the teacher's suggestion that Yuzi may have damaged programming. Con wonders if he didn't spend as much time as he should have with Yuzi. Finally realizing that he might have been terrible father, a worker interrupts to inform Con that a situation is happening in the colony outside the spire and asks if Yuzi is alright, only for Yuzi to proclaim that she is God. Yuzi comes down from her power trip when she notices Thad, who then hands over her railgun. Yuzi awkwardly accepts the railgun back and listens to Thad's request to look at the area she shot Jay in. Meanwhile, the creature assimilates several more drones, including Tim, who had previously assigned Frank to repair the roof at the entrance to the colony. A worker stops Yuzi, Thad, and N before they head in. He particularly questions N, and giving the drone an apology card drawn in crayon expressing his guilt over killing the previous drones stationed there. Ron tearfully accepts it, and asks N to not do it again. The trio witnesses a group of drones investigating a crime scene. Yuzi overhears that her father is in a parent-teacher conference over her, and as the drones discussing this find it cringe and asks Yuzi if she's okay, with Yuzi telling N that she's fine, and the trio creep further into the colony. The drone leading the investigation then discovers that everyone there was actually a hologram puppeteered by the monster. She is subsequently taken and assimilated as well. Back at the conference, Con goes off on the teacher about how Yuzi is not doing that bad. Lizzie asks Dull where her parents are, only for Dull to reply in Russian that they are deceased. Lizzie then sees a copy of herself outside the door and tries to let the drone in. Yuzi and Thad continue their investigation on the room where they thought Jay and B, and Yuzi remarks that she didn't know that disassembly drones could make the strange crawling trail. She observes and informs her that he does not understand what he is observing regarding this aspect. That catches their attention and directs them towards some boxes, which previously had a strange pattern burned into them by the creature, and notes that the pattern contains the same symbol seen on Yuzi's face. Yuzi reads the text and comes to the conclusion that the Absolute Solver is a backup program that activates when disassembly drones lack material mass to reconstitute their forms. In the event of major damage, the creature then enters the room and captures Thad, and Yuzi chases it into a cryolic chamber. And the monster creates an intentionally bad hologram of Thad, possibly to trick Yuzi into thinking that its holograms are terribly obvious. Yuzi and quickly pick up on the fact that it is a fake, as planned, and free Thad, who runs off but not before inviting the both of them to a party for the cool kids. The creature finally confronts them face to face, where it reveals that it's trying to repair Jay, as per its directive. When Yuzi calls it a program, it responds that the drones are cute puppets to it and shows a hologram of Yuzi's mother, remarking that its feelings are hurt that Yuzi doesn't remember it. When Yuzi stands in defiance of it, it adds a cooling off con to its performance before tricking Yuzi into giving her a railgun to a much more realistic hologram of N, who knocks it away, and then tries to assimilate Yuzi, only for the real N to come in and saw off its appendage as the monster destroys Yuzi's railgun. But the blast it creates, when it self-destructs, vaporizes the creature, while N shields Yuzi from the explosion. Con's body is revealed to be another hologram, and N stabs the solver device multiple times. As it makes a very poor attempt at a stealthy escape, it then collapses into something that resembles a black hole and floats away and tries to help Yuzi up, but she refuses his help, shaken, consequently causing N to be shaken as well. The real Connie and several WTF members run into the cryolic chamber, finding Yuzi. Con is at first confused, but then Yuzi hugs him as men search the area, only finding N, who quickly runs off. Dull is seen holding a piece of paper. The robot cockroach is then seen running up her arms. It then cuts to the scene when Lizzie and Dull were baited by the solver. As Lizzie attempts to open the door, Dull somehow crumples the door telekinetically, rendering it inoperable. leaving both Lizzie and the monster to abandon their task in the present. Doll looks at a photograph of a disassembly drawn, likely the, and the roach crawls in the photo. Doll wills it to explode and licks its remains off her face at the spider. He remarks on how much she usually hates N's normal personality, but dislikes N being downcast much more after getting no response. She softens a bit and scoots her now broken chain links together, feigning annoyance at N in the colony. Yuzi looks up at a web of theories involving the Absolute Solver program on her bedroom ceiling. Holy moly, this episode was amazing. I loved the introduction of Doll into the story, as I wonder what she gonna do in the future, and I loved the slowly build-up of this Absolute Solver who for some reason wants to build J back. Overall this episode is a 9 out of 10 due to being short, as if it was longer with at least 2 minutes to explain a little more of Doll's background. This episode would have been rated with another 10 out of 10. The episode opens on with a student named Kelsey Day running past some missing posters and away from someone, only to be caught up by that person, and it is revealed to be none other than Doll. Doll then uses the Absolute Solver to rotate the school's camera, cut Kelsey's right arm off, and kills her with a cleaver. Doll then comes home, using her telekinesis to put her books in the shelf. While crossing out Kelsey's name in a list, she then says that she's home to her mom and dad, while the camera pans to a swarm of cockroaches on the walls. The scene then cuts to Yuzi in sleep mode with the text "Guilt" active on her visor. A flashback plays, wherein Yuzi still holds guilt over refusing N's help after their battle, with Eldritch J looking up at her investigation wall, or, in this case, ceiling. Yuzi focuses in what is possibly N's drawing of himself and Yuzi, thanking her for being his friend. As she then began to groan, her groaning is stretched out to her in class, the gym, and opening her locker, the stack of books she stood in to reach. Her locker gets kicked off by Rebecca passing by. Yuzi angrily tries to throw a book at her, only to hit Brayden instead. As Rebecca and another worker drawn continue talking trash about her, she sighs and walks away. Until she then sees missing posters, then cackles, taking some of them and skip home to put them up onto her ceiling, only to then see that the papers in her investigation wall were gone. As it turns out, Khan had gotten a hold of them, and had put them into a closet labeled Nori's Cookie Insane Stuff. Khan then walks into Yuzi angrily sulking, who then yells at him for snooping in her room. Khan says
personal space for very alarming coping mechanisms isn't covered under a non-optional family support structure.
As he reads from a book, Yuzi calls Khan out for previously being neglectful and tries to leave to talk to N, only to see a skeleton of a child in a dress. Yuzi questions it, and Khan says that it's her prom dress, and that she's grounded from seeing the disassembly drawings. As it turns out, Connie and her teacher got Lizzie and Doll to help Yuzi prepare for prom, and that Khan himself is chaperoning, followed by Yuzi screaming meanwhile, and still feels guilt over what happened, while she only cares about her plan of showing up in prom and killing everyone, including Yuzi. And refuses to help V. Then he says that she promises to only kill what they need to survive. If Annie and Yuzi stopped trying to investigate their past. The scene cuts abruptly to Yuzi, Lizzie and Doll. In Doll's house, Lizzie complains about Doll's house being dirty, while Doll says that she put a sheet up. As they are sleeping, Yuzi tries to leave, but the door gets shut. Doll then tells her that the bathroom is down the hall to the left. The scene then cuts once again to Annie and V, and tells V that if she's hiding something, they could figure it out together, and then asks V what she knows, but gets cut off because of V decapitating him. V says that it's best for him, even if N hated V for it. V then escapes from the landing pod, along with the red dress. In the next scene, we see Yuzi in the bathroom in front of the mirror, apparently fixing her hair. One of her eyes flicker to the Absolute Solver, and Yuzi says, "Easy, Robo Satan, not this mirror." She then gets back to getting ready, when suddenly the absolute solver reappears and the mirror shatters. Yuzi then hears Lizzie saying that no one will notice she's Yuzi's missing. Lizzie also tells the person she's talking to do their thing, and she'll let him be, and she'll see them at the prom. Yuzi then realizes there was blood dripping from something that looked like a container. She goes to investigate, and opens the container. As there Yuzi discovered something shocking and wakes up, and with his head regenerated he looks at the skeleton which used to hold the red dress, and starts to panic. He reaches for the ladder, and looks back at the skeleton with the suit. He then turns back to the ladder, but looks at the suit again, in a rush to find V, but wanting to wear the suit at the same time. He tells himself there was no time, and climbs out, but his head reappears upside down, and he whispers, "Dapper N." The next scene, we see a close-up of Yuzi's visor, and we see her sweating. She pants, and the contents of the container we saw earlier appears to be a bunch of discarded mirrors. Yuzi hears steps approaching, and she looks around for an escape only to see a pile of mirrors, and the ventilation shaft open. Doll proceeds to say, as they say in Russian, "Oops, I should've predicted that someone could escape out of a ventilation shaft using discarded mirror as stairs." We then cut to Yuzi running away from Doll's apartment, panting, and then suddenly appears, and lands in front of Yuzi. They then have an awkward moment, and N says that he could help at the prom, but thinks that Yuzi probably doesn't want him. Yuzi then admits that she could use his help by being there with her, and then rushes behind her and hugs her, saying, "Dapper buddies." Yuzi then hits him, and proceeds to smile. The scene cuts, as it reveals that the prom has started. We see Thad breakdancing and doing push-ups, and being admired by a group of drones. We then see Conrad, who is looking around for something. Worried then, we see Lizzie on the stage, saying that, since the whole prom court mysteriously disappeared, they were doing it a little early. She says your queen by forfeit is this. Right after that, he crashes right onto the stage, while someone in the crowd yells, "Oh, we're gonna die." V cackles, and Lizzie tells the crowd that V is her friend, and that V was done with the murder and they've been hanging out. V then reveals that she'd been manipulating Lizzie, and cackles, but then stops, saying, "Prom queen?" Lizzie grins nervously, and V catches sight of the crown. V gets disgusted, as she can see Doll crumbling the prom queen paper and smiling. Then we zoom back to Lizzie, who apparently forgives and forgets what he has done, and she says she would get her dad to dock their grades if they don't agree. She also says Rebecca can't sit with them, and the spotlight goes to Rebecca, while V gets crowned prom queen, and everyone asks for a speech. Con tries to open the door, but finds out the door had been closed by the absolute solver. Working on Doll, V then decides to kill everyone after, and goes in front of the microphone, which was marked with an X. Doll gets ready to set up her absolute solver powers, just as he is about to speak, when Yuzi and N suddenly appear, jumping from above us. The episode's fight starting. Before I continue, I wanted to tell you how much I have loved this fight between Yuzi and Doll. Anyways, after Yuzi defeats Doll, she tries again to use her powers in Yuzi, but she gets shot from behind by V, killing her off. For now at least. Yuzi then scolds V for rendering Doll unconscious, as they needed her for answers. V brushes it off, saying that she's fine, even with the mess that resulted from her shot, and yells that V did it on purpose, as she's hiding mystery stuff and being overdramatic about it, making V punch him and telling him that he sucks. Yuzi yells at both V and N, to which the two pointed at each other, trying to dodge the blame from themselves. Yuzi picks up Doll's bracelet and reveals the key to her apartment. A time skip happens, where the trio enter Doll's house, now able to investigate her apartment more clearly. Annie and Yuzi get shocked by the amount of corpses and oil everywhere, whereas G only says nice. The camera gives close-ups to bodies, oil, and cockroaches swarming the surroundings. Yuzi is shocked, but then an arm appears, revealing V sucking on it for oil. Yuzi throws it away and yells at her to have self-respect. Yuzi and V split up to investigate Doll's apartment until Ellen uncovers what's under the sheet, showing the remains of Doll's parents, looking as if they are frozen in time back, when they were killed. He mockingly says that the oil didn't even taste that good, and tells her that she kind of sucks, which he agrees with. While they focused on Doll's parents, Doll herself somehow teleports inside her apartment. Smiling, she repairs her visor and rips out the bullet, preparing to shoot too. Which then, he and Yuzi notice her and gasp. The screen cuts to black. While a gunshot sound is heard, a purple absolute solver glyph lights up, as the black screen is revealed to be from Yuzi's visor. As it turns out, Yuzi's absolute solver powers activated, stopping the bullet mid-air. Doll, shocked, says that she's sorry for Yuzi. She says that she'll help her if she finds what she's looking for. While Yuzi is startled, Doll apologizes again and tries to teleport away, but not before he shoots her again, this time with a missile. Doll herself is not found. However, Yuzi whines and yells, "I hate it here." The camera transitions to the winter wasteland that is Copper 9, as a lone worker drawn, Reed, looks for something. He finds his excuse to be outside right now, that being his glasses. Reed then hears something in the distance, then looks up to the sky and sees a flash, which turned out to be a disassembly drone landing pod coming straight towards him. Reed manages to dodge the pod, as it crashes. As more debris fly towards him, he looks up to see another landing pod nearby, this time landing more gracefully, latching onto the decayed buildings and landing properly. A human who somehow reminds of Vanessa from FNAF Security Breaks Nems jumps out, pulling out a sword and immediately slicing off Reed's head. The human is then revealed to be none other than Tessa, now an adult woman who works for Jensen. As a certified technician, Tessa says, "Right, yo, work to do, AJ." As a fully reconstructed Jay flies next to her, and the revelation of Jay being already rebuilt was pretty surprising. Jay gives her a key with the keychain of the Earth. As she notes maintenance work, the landing pod beeping like a car. The scene pans out to the two landing pods with Tessa and Jay in the distance, as they all get completely obscured by a winter storm. This episode is another pick for the rating of 10 out of 10, despite Ofcon still being an annoying dad. In my opinion, Doll and Yuzi pretty much carried the episode. The actually doing something and reintroducing Jay back into the story was a neat touch, thus making me to not change the rating of the episode. The episode opens with Yuzi and her classmates arriving in a traditional school bus, with a man riding a bus, as if it was a horse carriage. Yuzi steps off last, holding her normal skull color with a flower pattern and a black color with another skull in it. The scene cuts to a flashback where Condorman shows Yuzi an old photo of Camp 98.7. It zooms in onto robots' necks with colors on them, one with the ID 048 and the other with 002. The colors are the ones current Yuzi was holding. Con tells Yuzi how her mother would always tell him to build doors against the coming sky demons, referring to the disassembly drones. He then continues with telling Yuzi to be safe and gives her the color she normally wears, while Con being an actually caring father. Shocking. The scene cuts to Yuzi putting one of them in. A student asks the teacher what the field trip is for, which the teacher tells him to ask Yuzi. The student asks who, and Yuzi replies that she's sat next to him for years. Everyone turns to look at her and jumps back, gasping. She says that she wanted to come alone, and that the teacher was mad at the class's test score. The aforementioned student questions whether the class is just going to be unsupervised when the NN land, wearing camp uniforms, and welcomes them and starts counting them, pointing at the end himself and expecting the class to continue when everyone just stands silently, frightened. He shoots one of them dead, prompting the rest to say their numbers in unison, and says that they have many distracting activities planned and tells them not to run away to investigate stuff. He tells the class to go to the bunks, but everyone remains there, petrified. That is the first one to walk towards the disassembly drones. Lizzie, who was stealing from the dead body, is second, throwing what she had taken at the Yuzi. Then does some sign language implying that she wants to leave her classmates and the teacher, and proceeds further and nods. Yuzi travels further into the forest and arrives at a cabin. Yuzi proceeds to look in a glass pane, revealing her reflection. As seen in episode 2, reflections make the absolute solver break the reflection. She panics as the glass breaks and puts down her bags and proceeds to use her absolute solver abilities. She then hears a scream from outside, but it's just her classmates having fun setting up camp. Yuzi starts overheating and goes to eat the oil in her bag. He stumbles across Yuzi and says, "You said this camp would help us find that red-eyed doll freak," which I admit is a pretty cool nickname for doll. He then proceeds to tell Yuzi that she will be the next one she will kill and goes away. While is Yuzi investigating the house, she finds a green variant of the robotic bug seen in episode 3. It opens up what I assume is a holographic chat, and while Yuzi is communicating with it, doll appears for a split second and then disappears. Yuzi returns to the campsite, where one of the drones is so surprised that they accidentally shoot her with an arrow. She uses the absolute solver to stop the arrow. However, after a second it explodes into oil and begins to mutate into an organic being. Everybody is horrified, and he attempts to kill Yuzi once again, until she runs away to a second cabin. Yuzi proceeds to close off all exits to the cabin. The lights that are on appear to hurt her, perhaps as a side effect, and she tries to turn them off. One of them fills with what I presume to oil and mutates, similar to the arrow, and gets mad at the end, questions her about the lack of information she is giving him, and the flies off. And V tells the surviving campers that they can do anything they want, and V leaves. Rebecca and Darren sneak off, and coincidentally choose the same cabin that Yuzi was in. Yuzi finds them, and kills Darren, while Rebecca escapes with half of her body and goes into yet another cabin, and picks up VHS tapes, which read "Zombie Drones," and has a flashback, I believe, of an unknown drone and a black hole-ish thing. He takes them with him back at the camp. The campers find that Rebecca has been torn apart. She attempts to tell them that Yuzi did this, but she doesn't remember her name. Rebecca dies, and Yuzi appears. She has gone under a transformation imitating the disassembly drones, with strange organic wings and ascension tail, and visor symbols which switch from an X to the absolute solver symbol. The campers split up, all being killed by Yuzi except for Lizzie. As V protects her, V knocks Yuzi down, and says, "New body, same horrors. Sin?" Yuzi regenerates, proceeds to cut V's tail off with her own, and attempts to stab her with it, before N stops Yuzi, and she stabs him instead and throws Yuzi into the sky, and he flies up with her, comforting Yuzi and returning her to her original form. Once they hit the ground, the survivors return to the bus and they leave the camp. In the bus, the sun rises and burns Yuzi's hand, until M pulls it out of the light. He has a nervous expression, and the camera pans to the VHS tapes, ending the episode. As much as I loved seeing more of Yuzi and N, who slowly began to grow on me, I have to admit that this episode was kinda filler. In my opinion, this shall get a rating of 7 out of 10 due to making N and Yuzi's interactions more cuter. Poor V is just dragged into their loving plot, isn't she? This episode starts with Jensen training VHS tape in disassembly drones and why and how one should dispose of one if it's no longer effective, but the VHS gets cut out to show a pile of dead drones with the crow pecking out some of the wires. Then the inside of the pile is shown, where a scared and frightened worker drone is shown before cutting away to Elliot Manor. Inside the manor are many motionless worker drones in various different poses. Before it shows the library, where N is happily reading a book about dogs. A motionless V stands right next to him. Then, a group of thumping noises are heard, which causes N to put down his book to investigate the noise. Then the basement starts banging, and seconds later several books fall from the shelf. and ends up disregarding the noise and decides to leave the library to continue with his duties, and then walks to the bar and has a small conversation with another worker drone named Sin. The two of them talk to each other about the gale that's happening at the manor. Sin wants to go, but then claims it's just not possible. But while wiping a splatter of blood in his plate, He sees the words basement now. Stop ignoring me. His greater than frowning face. After throwing away the plate in shock, he agrees to ask Tessa if they can come to the gala. After Sin gives him the pulpy eyes, the two then head to the dining hall, where they see multiple worker drones setting up the furniture, with a blacked out person who is James Elliot, PTW, scolding two of them before throwing a fork into one of them, killing it. They also see Jay and Tessa talking to each other, with Tessa excited about the gala, while she happily greets and hugs in, and notices a message being written out on the window that says, "When you about to frickin' die, speak aloud." ID, Dark's Wolf 17 inches. But before he could say anything, Tessa then looked at Sin, and Sin said that Jay forgot to let her out of her basement again. Tessa's mother, Louise Elliott, then comes over, scolding Tessa for bringing out the drones again and declaring that the three of them will be thrown out as well for not locking in Sin. Tessa apologizes, and that's when Sin tells Louisa that they aren't broken, and no matter what, they can't be thrown out. But before Louisa could do anything, Anne quickly jumped to her defense and took the blame for Sin's behavior. This leads to him being taken outside, where a flock of crows peck at him. He at first screams, but then laughs at their behavior. He then throws a stick to drive their attention away, but another crow grabs it midair, causing the crows to peck at him again, and, quickly remembering the message in the window, quickly shouts, "Dark's Wolf 17." The next moment, the crows flew away except for one that was just standing still. A lightning strike occurs, showing the crow as the absolute solver icon before making odd movements and cracking bones before laying it on the ground. The crow then starts to get up, and then a purple absolute solver icon shows with the user tag with the name Dark's Wolf 17. Then and hears Yuzi's voice coming from the crow, revealing that she now has complete control over it and has now accessed N's past OH. So that's what the deal with the sudden appearances of the crows was. Back in the manor, Tessa is seen in her bedroom with a chain connected to her leg, begging Sin and Jay to let her go, but Jay refuses due to orders and Sin being busy playing with dolls. However, while looking at the chain, Sin appears right next to her, now with the appearance of an eldritch, telling her if she doesn't get rid of them, she won't do the same with her. Before escaping through the window, she warns a shocked Tessa and Jay not to go to the gala. Back outside, Raven Yuzi tells in that his future self passed out because of a program and that his past memories are trying to get deleted. She warns in that they need to restore his past memory before he gets digitally lobotomized. She then instructs past N to go to the library basement. However, the crow then shouts for its dad to get out of their room. It's revealed that in the present time, Khan has entered Yuzi's room to check on her. Annie and G are also seen lying on the ground with X's on their eyes and not moving. Yuzi scolds her dad and locks him out with the absolute solver before taking back control of the Raven again. The two then arrive at the entrance of the manor, where they see a deactivated V standing still, while a flash of lightning illuminates the wall, showing a pair of wings and splattered blood everywhere. N starts to have some hesitation about going further, but Raven Yuzi tells him that this is both important to her and to him. But when N refuses to move closer, Raven Yuzi tugs him until he's closer to me. He moves the motionless drone aside and lifts the rug up, revealing the basement to be locked. The two groan until they hear someone giggle. They look over to B, who is now grinning and has a claw-like hand. It then cuts back to Tessa's bedroom, where Jay is biting off her chains and breaking her free. Now, with the two realizing that Sin is going to kill everyone at the gala, the two quickly leave the room, while quietly tiptoeing across the hallway in order to put a stop to this. After Tessa bumps into a knight in armor, she and Jay agree to bring some weapons with them for protection, a gun and a sword to be precisely. Annie and Raven Yuzi then appear in motion for the latter to lay low, because, when they looked up, he was shown crawling on the ceiling. The three pair up, ready for an attack, within telling Tessa they need the key to the basement. Raven Yuzi then grabs the key, while walking past Jay, but before long, V jumps down and starts to attack the trio. J shouts at Annie and Raven Yuzi to quickly go to the basement, while she and Tessa take care of V. However, V attempts to grab the key from him but is quickly stopped before she could lay a claw on him, while a puzzled and angered James comments in the tomfoolery and then heads off into the manor and finally finds the basement. But as soon as he unlocks it, an eldritch sin appears from the basement and knocks Raven Yuzi off, destroying the Raven, and proceeds to grab Annie. He screams for help, but the eldritch all of a sudden stops and changes its eyes from yellow to purple, meaning that Yuzi now has control over it. She grabs Annie and they scan the basement for clues, until they discover the mutilated corpses of other unfortunate worker drones before coming across the decapitated and sitting in a chair. The two agree it was time to leave, when all of a sudden another loud thumping was heard. Yuzi loses control of the eldritch and is back in the present. The thumping sounds continue with her father asking Yuzi about Doll being present in the house, and before long, she appears right in front of her. Back in the flashback, Anne unfortunately gets captured by the eldritch and is placed in the chair. Meanwhile, back upstairs, the gala is about to begin with James commencing it. However, Sin appears right in front of the guests ready to attack, but luckily, Jay and Tessa arrived to put an end to the yet-to-be massacred James, and Louisa scold their daughter for her tomfoolery, but are immediately pushed aside by the absolute solver. Tessa then tries to stop Sin by throwing several different objects at her, but to no use. Sin then tell her she didn't have to witness this, and by using the absolute solver, she was able to control all of the drones in the building, including Jay, to massacre everyone in the dining room. As Anne hears the blood-curdling screams of the guests, the eldritch tries to grab some nearby tools to get rid of Anne's memories, but when it couldn't, it calls for V to help out, but also couldn't do it. Back in the present, Doll and Yuzi continued to fight each other, but when Yuzi noticed that Anne is in danger, she quickly forks over the key in the hopes it would leave her and the others alone. It works with Doll then thanks Khan for raising a good daughter before teleporting away back in the memory, and proceeds to give her glasses back in the hopes it can help V pick up the skeletal. As Anne proceeds to accept his fate, V luckily regains part of her memory and tries to sympathize with him, but immediately gets stopped by the eldritch, who plans to use more threatening tools on him. V luckily for Anne, Yuzi is able to regain control over the eldritch before it can wipe his memories out, and was able to save V as well. Now that Anne realizes Yuzi was helping him this entire time, thanks her for saving him, but V gets angry at her and wakes herself, and from the trance Doll then teleports outside, where she meets with Jay and Tessa, where they are given the key. She asks them to take her with them, but is shot at by Tessa to make sure she isn't going to betray them. But as they turn around, Yuzi and V were right in front of them, thus ending the episode with a cliffhanger. Looks like Murder Drones is on a roll, as this episode shall get a rating of 9.5 out of 10 due to how brilliant Sin, Jay and N were in this episode. My only nitpick with this episode was Khan appearing in it, until he is knocked down by Dolly. The episode opens at Cabin Fever Labs, where a worker drone tries to retrieve another worker drone who is bootlooped from Sentinels, the Velociraptor-like robots, only for two of the Sentinels to tear the drone apart. Another Sentinel closes on her, bootloops her with a flashlight, and eventually kills 029. Meanwhile, Yuzi and V meet up with Tessa and Jay. As Tessa explains why she and Jay are in Copper 9, Doll steals the keyboard she had given them earlier and flees with it, prompting the group to give chase. Doll escapes anyway by hopping into a hole leading to the labs. Yuzi and V and Tessa venture into the labs, while Jay stays behind to suffocate Tessa's ship. The foursome find the entrance to the labs, which is full of disassembly drones' corpses. When they find the route to the secret elevator, Tessa is dragged away by a trap, so Yuzi and V follow her, finding a spider baby worker drone. Anne attempts to shoot the spider baby, but it escapes. Suddenly, a female worker drone appears with the spider baby, just as an impulse knocks Yuzi and and V out. Yuzi wakes up in a hospital room, where the female worker drone, named Alice, beheads a paralyzed worker drone, revealing she scavenges parts of both worker and disassembly drones for herself. She keeps the biomechanical cores of the latter's inside oven, in a stasis-like state. While she is talking with Yuzi, Alice mentions that Nori left them to die, shocking Yuzi. Meanwhile, in a room where Annie and Tess are kept, though, the spider baby drone is performing surgery on Anne, who is incredibly unfazed about being cut open. Bo is called over by Alice for more sedatives, which are actually magnets to negate Yuzi's absolute solver powers. Tessa seizes the chance to escape within, and the two head to save Yuzi and V. In the way, Tessa gives Anne a look at Earth, which, albeit off-screen, leaves him stunned. Alice, finding out Annie and Tessa escaped, releases a group of sentinels locked in cages, intending for the dinosaur robots to kill the two. The picture of Earth that Tessa showed to Anne is finally revealed. Tessa then tells Anne that he must choose either the universe or Yuzi, something that afflicts Anne, since he doesn't want Yuzi be killed, but rather fixed. Just then, a sentinel arrives and bootloops in, and when it was about to kill him, Tessa attempts to intervene by having the sentinel trust her. However, the sentinel instead bites her arm. This causes the sentinel, which has harmed a human, something it shouldn't do, to apparently kill itself. More sentinels start to close on Tessa, while Alice gleefully watches. She notices everything in the room is floating because of Yuzi's temporarily possessed by sin solver powers, which she uses to open an organic black hole in the walls. Yuzi loses consciousness shortly after. The sentinels notice the door to Alice's room is open and head their right, as Alice tried to close them. The sentinels break in, killing Alice, and try to kill Yuzi too, but are distracted by Bo charging up a laser beam. However, Bo uses it to free V at the cost of its own life. V is cornered by sentinels, although they are consumed by the black hole, and flees with Yuzi. Anne wakes up from his boot loop, as V and Yuzi reunite with him and Tessa, who is berated by V about the control she claimed to have over the sentinels. Tessa tells to Anne she hasn't been quite honest with V yet. Yuzi wakes up and hugs Anne upon sight, while V stares ominously at Tessa. Meanwhile, the sentinel who had wounded Tessa's arm reboots as a red-eyed variant, willing to terminate humans. The foursome track the sentinels down into a long hallway, where the secret elevator is. To their surprise, Doll lays in a boot loop state, having apparently been killed by sentinels. As they walk, Yuzi and Anne start to show more signs of growing much closer. Doll, however, had faked being in a boot loop state to lure the group into the hallway, steal the keybic, and dropping a lift in the way to cut them off from chasing her, leaving them trapped with sentinels. Tessa distracts the sentinels away from the group with her blood, but the red-eyed sentinel arrives. Yuzi tries to use her solver powers to open a hole in the lift, but it ends up opening another black hole which she cannot control. The red-eyed sentinel uses a dismembered disassembly drawn arms gun to shoot Tessa, but V manages to catch the bullet, and proceeds to battle the sentinel who fired it, using a pair of glasses to negate its flash attack. While V fights the sentinel, and, seeing that Yuzi is not able to stop the black hole from growing, severs her arm, stopping the hole. Tessa, Anne, and Yuzi enter the falling lift from the black hole's remnants, as V manages to defeat the red-eyed sentinel. However, another sentinel causes the lift to ascend back, and the sentinels start to outnumber V, while the lift falls enough to prevent her from joining the others. Despite Anne's pleas, V sacrifices herself by shooting the lift's cables with a beam that will cause the cables to be cut, dropping the lift. Wow, I must admit that V's death was pretty shocking, as I didn't saw that coming. This episode shall get a 9 out of 10, as I believe that the next episode will surpass it, and for the fact that I found Alice pretty boring and her portrayal really dragged the episode down a little. The episode starts off with a flashback of Jensen scientists trying to keep the absolute solver who has possessed Nori under control. An intern named Mitchell accidentally wears the uniform of a scientist called Dr. Chambers, causing the team to call upon him. The solver takes the distraction and tries to attack the scientists, before it's put at bay for a short time. Dr. Ridley, who resembles a priest, holds us in the form of a crucifix whilst Mitchell is handed Yeva's ID and goes to get her. After retrieving Eva, he locks her out and discovers that the other scientists were killed by the solver who dragged them into a hole. The flashback, which was actually a video, ends as a drone, in the form of a heart, crosses off an area on a map, as they go to the hole with a pickaxe. It then cuts to Tessa, Yuzi and N falling out of the elevator into the rubble. N, enraged by V's sacrifice, tries breaking out to see if V is still alive, almost crushing Tessa and Yuzi. After reprimanded, Tessa suggests to N to start Yuzi's termination, but N looks at Tessa and firmly tells Yuzi they won't hurt her. This sends Yuzi into a panic, causing her to open a black hole, separating the three from each other. Thad and Lizzie are leaving the colony, Lizzie bringing him out to see something. As Thad asks Lizzie if her secret friend wants to know about football, the environment suddenly loses gravity and then goes back, before a ship comes, Lizzie claiming that was the reason she brought Thad out. And is caught in the rubble, and as he is about to cut his arm off, a hologram of V appears, causing him to scream in terror. Yuzi is disoriented and she climbs up from the floor before seeing a notice board with a picture of Nori with tentacles and yellow eyes. She recollects herself and starts walking through the entrance. N is panicking as V comes closer, desperately trying to cut his arm, and as soon as she gets to N, she transforms into Sin and he flashbacks to the disassembly drone slaughtering the human race. He snaps out of it before Sin drags him away. We go back to Yuzi, as she gets to the center and watches the video from the start. N is dragged all around, trying to free himself. He almost gets killed before the heart saves him. She questions why Sin was trying to kill her own drones, then the solver starts chasing them. The heart directs him through, asking if he could get the cross to the surface for it and saying it's looking for Khan. N reacts with surprise, Yuzi's dead, only for the heart to pull him aside. The heart asks how he knows its daughter, indirectly revealing itself to be Nori Dorman, Yuzi's supposedly dead mother. Meanwhile on the surface, Thad and Lizzie plan in attacking but the spire explodes and the ship ejects. They approach, before Khan arrives and the gravity becomes messed up again. Tessa goes to a nearby computer whilst searching the lockers. She destroys the computers before getting confronted by Doll. She asks where the patch is, the crucifix. Doll angrily tells Tessa that she needs it to prevent the solver from using her to destroy the planet. Tessa tells Doll that it didn't need her before vanishing. Doll detects something in the distance charging for her, trying to hold her off, but these efforts are useless and Doll is ambushed by a creature and then Doll is brutally killed off. Not gonna lie, Doll's death was kinda sad due to the fact that Lime could have involved Doll more into the story. In the recording, Nori is about to impale Mitchell with the crucifix before Eva stops it and sends it flying into Nori's face, freeing her from the solver's influence but her mind being left scrambled. Yuzi finishes the video and rips off her color chain out of horror before seeing Doll collapse to the floor, dead. Her last words in her visor saying fight back, but in Russian. A thing that I love about this series is that it has a lot of neat details like the writing in Russian. In Doll's screen Tessa walks in and assumes Yuzi killed Doll. Annie and Nori are on the way, and being told not to tell Yuzi that Nori is still alive, or else Nori will kill him. Anne protests that he won't keep secrets from Yuzi, but eventually promises to wait until Nori is ready to tell Yuzi herself. Tessa proceeds to try and execute Yuzi attempting to use her solver only for it to be denied due to Tessa being a like object. Before Tessa can kill her, Anne comes in, demanding to know if Tessa knew about the patch. When Tessa doesn't give him a direct answer, he beheads her and helps Yuzi up, but the solver possesses her and proceeds to attack Anne. They attempt to behead Anne before Nori stops and holds them off. They all get into a heated battle, before Anne is critically damaged. He triggers Nori by telling her about Annie and Yuzi's relationship, which makes her enraged at Yuzi, reminding her that disassembly drones killed her mother, causing the latter to snap out of the solver's control. Yuzi flings Nori into the pit, only for Anne to reveal that it was Nori. Both begin screaming, but they eventually just hug. Whilst they reunite, Tessa's head almost rolls into the pit before her headless body reattaches itself and unzips. She goes to Dell's body and eats her core, revealing her true form as Sin, who grafted Tessa's corpse onto her own. She attacks Annie and Yuzi and attempts to drag them in the pit. Meanwhile, in the surface, Jay lands her ship at the entrance and tries to contact Tessa, but she gets hit by the school bus from cabin fever, losing the keys to her ship in the process. Angered, she draws her gun at the bus, demanding to know the identities of the drivers. She sees Lizzie and Thad posing ominously in the fog, holding a railgun and metal pipe respectively, while Con is smugly lying on the bus roof. Upon noticing the railgun light up, a warning sign with the words "Prior Hazard" lights up in her visor, a callback to her death by Yuzi's railgun during the first episode. Yuzi and Anne are clinging on and Yuzi makes the decision to sacrifice herself, her visor displaying a message that says "Diomed," and throws Anne out of the labs with the ship's keys, as she ultimately falls into the pit. In the ending scene, it's shown Yuzi is not dead, as she somehow ended up in space, which leaves the episode in yet another cliffhanger before the huge finale. This episode is a solid 10 out of 10. I have 2 words to describe this episode, with those words being nightmare fuel. I won't talk much about this episode, since it mostly shows Yuzi and Anne alongside their allies fighting off Wixini and Jay, with both of them ending up dying, and one more thing, V is revealed to be alive, which just makes sense in my opinion. The show ends with Yuzi makes a presentation out of the event in class, and ultimately admits that she does not date it on Copper 9, and that they should have stayed behind the doors. This time, most of the class claps for her, with them cheering in support of his girlfriend, Con cheering at the mentional doors, and Lizzie and V going in the back, and displaying Dell's corpse somewhere in the labs, after which V is hit by a paper airplane, revealing Anne's new drawing skills, derived from a How to Draw manga book. Yuzi also surprises the class by simultaneously using what is presumably Sin's absolute solver abilities with her own. The credits play, showcasing several further events, including one Jay fixing the original drop pod. I thought that Jay died, but oh well. To Annie and Yuzi playing a proper game of cards with the people manning the door, along with Nori resting on top of Con's head, along with Annie and Yuzi watching an anime together, with characters resembling themselves, and 3 the class holding a funeral for Dell. Annie and Yuzi also share a dance in the sky, before V shoots at them, forcing them down. It then cuts to something inside of a cryolic unit, resembling the original Eldritch J. As a post-credits scene, Yuzi stands outside of her locker, staring into its mirror, which flickers an image of her core instead of breaking. The solver, now possessing her tail, comments that she looks great, but suggests that she tries a bow on, perching the same bow Tessa wore on top of her head. Yuzi promptly shuts the locker, ending not only the episode, but the entire series. I will rate this episode with a score of 8 out of 10 due to how rushed the episode felt after analyzing each episode. I shall give this show a final rating of 9 out of 10. I definitely recommend you to watch this show during the free time, and before I shall end the episode, I shall present you my tier list with every character of the show.